Have you ever wondered how the very politicians we entrust to lead us could betray that trust on such a massive scale?
So my question is, how vulnerable are we to this, especially given the fact that we've already come out of the European Union? One of you.
I'll start.
Your trade.
Good morning, everyone.
This is Rachel Reeves, completely lost in life, in government, and live on air in an interview. While serving as the Chancellor...
This government have shown we simply cannot trust their word.
Imagine this. You've worked your entire life, finally retired, and now...
They promised not to raise taxes, they did.
Yep.
They promised not to cut winter fuel payments, they did. They promised not to borrow more, and they did. We need to see action, not just words.
Out of nowhere, the government decides to take a chunk of your state pension. Sounds outrageous, right? What if the crisis that caused untold hardship for millions wasn't just mismanagement but a lie?
They gave warm words when they felt it was politically expedient to do so. And let's listen to some of those warm words. Let's start off with the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, who said, and I quote, "All your working life you've got in mind the date on which you can retire and get your pension. And just as you get towards it, the goalposts are moved and you don't get it. And that's a real injustice." They want their money back, and quite rightly so.
The public's anger quickly shifted into outrage. Protests erupted across the UK. Social media exploded with demands for accountability. News outlets abandoned passive reporting and began issuing sharp condemnations. Across talk shows, newsrooms, and dinner tables, one question echoed. How could they let this happen?
Indeed, it's the mark of a civilised society, the extent to which it looks after vulnerable people. And remember, many pensioners only have the state pension as their main source of income.
Sir Keir Starmer's handling or mishandling of the scandal came under the harshest spotlight. Does he understand why the people, especially in Scotland, view him with such disdain? After more than a decade of Labour control, their incompetence has left mountains of rubbish piled on city streets so large they can be seen from space.
If we are looking to remove the greatest barriers to growth in this country, perhaps we should start with the Prime Minister and the Chancellor of the Exchequer.
It is an indictment not only of failed leadership, but of a party that has lost its grip on reality. Will the Prime Minister take urgent action to protect public health and the people of Birmingham by deploying emergency measures? And here lies the heart of the matter. A scandal that has shaken British politics to its core. A £22 billion cover-up exposed live on national television.
Eyes of the world are watching what's happening here in Washington, including over in the UK. And in the UK today, Sir Keir Starmer has been responding to the enormous failures.
Is prison next for the man at the centre of the storm? The credibility of the once untouchable Prime Minister is hanging by a thread. What began as a supposed fiscal emergency has morphed into a national nightmare. And now...
what happened?
Is going to exercise people this morning. Let me show you the front page of the Sunday Express. 6.6 billion quid. I thought there was no money, by the way. There's no money. Big fiscal hole. No. 6.6 billion. Cost of asylum. This isn't the cost of asylum seekers. This is the cost of asylum seekers' support. What do I mean by that? So we paid £6.6 billion on asylum seeker and refugee support schemes.
The question on everyone's lips is whether Starmer will face the consequences of his actions. While promising constructive opposition, Starmer stood in Parliament and offered congratulations to President-elect Trump. Yet, many haven't forgotten the remarks previously made by the Foreign Secretary. Trump is not only a woman-hating, neo-Nazi, sympathizing sociopath, but a profound threat to the international order. Was an apology ever made?
The relationship between our two nations has been one of collaboration, cooperation, and enduring partnership.
Well, that's quite the turnaround from this.
Of course, I wouldn't want Donald Trump round for dinner, but don't underestimate the danger to the world if Trump is re-elected this time around. I'm anti-Trump.
Joining me now is GB News host
Behind closed doors, whispers turned into accusations. Some claimed it was a miscommunication. Others saw it for what it was, a deliberate strategy to justify sweeping austerity under false pretenses. The £22 billion deficit turned out to be fiction.
But most crucially, my lords, please let me quote Richard Hughes, the chair of the OBR itself, and I quote, "Nothing in our review was a legitimisation of that £22 billion figure."
Economists and watchdogs found no trace of this figure in official reports. The nearest number was £9.5 billion, and even that was a projection, not a confirmed shortfall.
I think it's fair to say, and obviously you're not the arbiter of the US's tariff trade policy, the consequences of what's already been announced are quite significant. What concerns the committee, I think, is that the OBR world economy forecast, based on the IMF forecast, doesn't incorporate any of the changes. Now, you have maintained your headroom, and my colleagues will ask you in more detail about that, at 9.93 billion, exactly the same as in October. It's 50% higher than the most recent of your predecessors, Jeremy Hunt. But against an average over the last 15 years, it's a very, very modest one. Professor Miles told us yesterday from the OBR that if we have the sorts of tariffs that have already been announced on cars and they're maintained, it'll knock out all the headroom.
Yet, Starmer's government clung to the inflated £22 billion figure. Ministers began dodging interviews.
And one of the other things you said to me into this committee on the 6th of November is that you wouldn't be coming back for any more tax increases. Can you confirm to the committee today that you won't be raising taxes?
There's a lot of questions to...
answer the last one first.
The narrative started to fall apart. Starmer, once composed, now appeared defensive, evasive, even panicked. The opposition pounced, Parliament grew louder, and the people more furious.
People who voted with hope for a government that they believed would reduce their energy bills and look after vulnerable pensioners.
This is not an example of fairness, it's not an example of certainty, and it's certainly not an example of being straight with pensioners.
Where were the answers? The Labour leadership offered none. Instead, we got silence, deflection, damage control. As more evidence came to light, it became clear this wasn't a simple mistake. It was a strategy. The false figure had been inserted into key documents. Internal emails leaked to the press exposed how officials had raised red flags only to be ignored. Some documents were outright doctored for optics. This was manipulation, not mismanagement.
When, not if, when her fiscal rules are breached, which will she do? Increase borrowing, raise taxes or cut spending? Not over 5 years, this year.
I've been really clear. We will meet our fiscal rules that I set out in the budget, and we will do that at all times, and that is the commitment that I made and a commitment that I continue to make.
And the consequences were real. Schools cancelled programs, NHS services were postponed. Families, already struggling under economic pressure, were told to endure more austerity for a lie. Investigative journalists, economists, and civil servants dug deeper. What they found was damning. The £22 billion number never existed in official documentation.
The situation we're in is you, and how much is the past? You routinely blame the Tories for the situation you're in, but business leaders routinely say that it was your pessimistic messages in the autumn that discouraged spending, your national insurance rise that halted hiring and depressed the economy. Honestly, looking back at it now, did you overdo the...
One internal memo estimated the deficit at less than half that and subject to revision. Yet, Starmer's team used the higher figure to push through brutal policies. Whistleblowers described it as a coordinated campaign of fear.
What I'm asking about, the message you were giving and the Prime Minister through the autumn was, it's terrible, it's awful, we have to do all sorts of things. Did you overdo the pessimism?
Public trust was shattered. Protests swept the nation. The public wanted answers, not talking points. As pressure mounted, Starmer became increasingly isolated. His own party began to distance themselves. Talk of a no-confidence vote gained traction. Media outlets that once defended him turned sharply against him. Even those once loyal started jumping ship. The fabricated crisis had served its purpose, but at an extraordinary cost. People had suffered. Lives were upended.
When the
Trust was
OBR
broken.
says nothing in their review was a legitimisation of the number that has now been repeated 59 times...
Is that going to depress the economy further?
Well, look, the Office of Budget Responsibility will set out their forecast. I recognise that there are costs. Because it's them who do the forecast.
Because you're the Chancellor, and you've mentioned the OBR, I think, now 5 times. Who's running this country? Is it you or the OBR?
But I'm afraid I have to challenge the validity of his data on what he refers to as the black hole. Please let me quote Paul Johnson, the director of the Institute for Fiscal Studies, and I quote, "Rachel Reeves may be over-egging the £22 billion black hole."
And now the Prime Minister faced a reckoning. Legal experts began weighing in. Was this criminal negligence? Was Starmer facing potential jail time? The scandal escalated with every revelation. Parliament demanded accountability. Committees convened emergency sessions. Leaked emails, hidden reports, and insider testimony all pointed to one truth. This was not a fiscal crisis. It was a political weapon.
Listen to people here, they'll say taxes, you've got taxes on business, taxes on wealth, taxes on school fees. You've got small businesses spending all their time now worrying about inheritance tax. Non-DOMs complain, say you're Rachel Leaves, not Rachel Reeves, because they're all heading abroad.
The fallout? Devastating. Starmer's reputation, once built on trust and pragmatism, lay in ruins. His team fractured, his authority crumbled, and the British people demanded justice. So what comes next? Will Keir Starmer face legal consequences for orchestrating what some are calling the greatest political deception in modern British history? That remains to be seen. But what's certain is this: the truth is out, and there's no turning back.